How do you bring your science and engineering background into who you are as a person and into your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that as you as an investor probably ask people like, or gauge, are you coachable? Like one of the things I think about me that I've recognized early on is I very much am, and I really value coaching. Like I very much value mentorship and coaching and support in that way. Cause I think that, there's like two elements that go with that. One is like, I don't have it all figured out. And two, I need frameworks that I don't yet have visibility to. And, you kind of get from sort of the outside in. So I think one of the things that I started to really love was practicing what I called like life hacks or life design. And it was actually like kind of doing those programs that would help you develop more intentionality, right? What do you like to, and just getting more and more refined. So I like did one in LA that was fundamentally changed the course of my life for sure. But that was probably mid 20s, early, late, when I was 27. And that was foundational. You had to build out a whole, what do you see your life like? What do you want all areas of your life, from your health, your wealth, your like social structure. So it made you think for all these parameters, which I don't feel like we get very much opportunity to do, and definitely not in sort of standard academic settings. And I also think that I didn't grow up with wealth at all. And so I didn't grow up around money or how to talk about it, or, so I was in massive debt and I didn't know how to learn about it. So I spent a bunch of energy trying to figure out how do people like me who have no one to really teach them learn about it and structure it. So I'm not that far behind. It turns out that if you actually understand how money works, that you can get out of debt pretty fast and you can get ahead of the game if you're smart, so all these things are solvable. But I think one, based off of like, maybe it is just ingrained in who I am. Like I definitely appreciate coaching, like been in, trained gymnast since I was little. Right. So that's like sort of just how I operated. Two, like seeked out programs that would help force me to develop more intentionality at different periods of my life. So I just, I did one in like late 20s, did one like definitely a couple times in 30s. And then now at 40, I am definitely redoing it again.
So you created a company that's really critical to think about the climate impact that we're all having on the world. How do you create substantial amounts of carbon change? We are all sitting sitting on pins and needles. We need to know, what's the solution?
Well, one, I mean, to curb climate change, we need a variety of solutions. But one of the biggest contributing factors that we as humans are on this planet contributing to carbon emissions is with energy in the transportation sector. So, I think that what's happened over the last decade is that there was sort of the major energy transition that occurred with petroleum being utilized and then ignition engines being used, and everyone has a car now that has used petroleum as the primary fueling source. And of course, that has the complications that we're seeing today. And where we are now is that there's one of the most amazing pivot points in history of this energy transition to electric vehicles. And the whole goal is to massively curb climate change and massively reduce the carbon emissions that we get from sort of tip standard transportation approaches. What we're doing is tackling how to make the battery that goes into the EV, all of the materials in ways that are much, much more sustainable, so that one, you can massively reduce the cost so that we can electrify everything in a much more effective way, even our houses, everything like that. So like that's the number one goal, is massively reduce the cost so that you can have widespread adoption. But then the secondary goal is do that in a way that is much more energy efficient, so that the production processes to make these materials is substantially cut, so you don't have unintended consequences on the environment that you will see, from all the wastewater and all of the movement of these materials. So there's ways to do it that's much more smart, and that's where we focused our energy.
Yeah. What do you think we need? Just intention? Is the science there, but it's about intention and people making the right trade-offs?
Yeah, I think that the science is there. I think that there is definitely some urgencies. I think that there is a gap between what needs to happen as far as like a time sequence and to fill the ultimate goal of climate change, right? So none of this matters if it's not done well, right? But I think that the industry is big enough now, like the the automotive industry is so large. There's a lot of people that have different agendas and or varying agendas. So, you have to align all the agendas. So everything has to be focused on ultimately curbing climate change at a scale that's necessary. I think that the agendas, we've reached a pretty big magic tipping point in the last, quite honestly, months. You're seeing a huge amount of government activity going into spurring that in the US, Europe, India, we just got the phone off of a group in India, all over the world. So I think it's going to come. And then I think for us, we have to choose partners wisely. We need to capitalize well, and we need to make sure that we stay focused on the end goals. And, I really think that we can make big change happen in a short period of time if we can do all those things well.
And it's not binary, right? You can have a great impact on the climate and make great money at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about electric vehicles and sort of what is the cycle, if you will? What is the biggest cost that goes into making them, and how do we get this change, really for the battery value chain? Well,
yeah. So when you're looking at the cost of an electric vehicle, which is different than, an internal combustion engine, is the largest cost sink is the battery. It can be up to like 60% of the cost, depending on like the vehicle that you're looking at, right? So that's huge, and that's different, right? So that means that car manufacturers before, they made vehicles and they made, they could get all these different parts, but now to have the largest cost sink also be the most important for performance, it's the battery. So all these manufacturers are having to turn into mini battery companies. And I think that that's mind blowing. That's a big shift. And of the battery pack, the largest piece, 67% of the battery cost, which is more than can be close to half the cost of the vehicle, is just cathode material. So it's just this material that is coming from rare earth metals that is mined and then turned into the specialty, the active material that goes in to help the lithium be the energy source. So there's a lot of opportunity to actually focus on cathode material production and change the way it's produced so that you can change the cost dynamic substantially, and also do that in a way that's much, much more sustainable. So you're not
less expensive, but what is it about the cathode material that needs to change?
Currently, there's cathode materials that are on the market and that are going to be slotted into a lot of electric vehicles that perform well. They perform great, and they meet all the dynamics that you need for that vehicle. What needs to change is not the actual material, but it's actually how it's manufactured. I think that that's an important point, because what most people and what I've seen in the news, over the last decade, was batteries are constantly changing. The materials that are going into them are constantly evolving and changing. And now we're reaching a place in the market where it's matured enough, where everyone's kind of locked in saying, hey, this is performing pretty good. Now it's about actually how do we get more of this material in a cost-effective way that also is energy efficient, so we can reduce the carbon life cycle ultimately.
And what makes Silvatex so special? Like, what is it about the approach and the company and your leadership?
Yeah, I mean, that's a loaded question. So there's, I'd say approach first that's pretty unique is a lot of us, when we started the company initially with the goal to massively curb carbon emissions, targeting transportation applications. Our first application was in fuels. And since then, we've really pivoted a majority of our time into EV battery materials because of how much change you can have and realize it's exponential. So the team really came from a pretty substantial background of chemicals and fuels. So we generally think about big industrial applications and how those can be massively mitigated. So I think that's been an interesting way of how we've approached the problem solution set. And then what makes, I'd say me and we a little bit more unique is, one, I definitely am super collaborative, right? So, I mean, this is like a big global problem. I by no means think that we have all the capabilities, but I do believe that we add specific, unique value. And so we partner with the national labs that are cutting edge on the technical side. And then we leverage industry's learnings and work with them very closely on their problem solution set so that we can really find our niche value and help the market grow in an expedited way.